the Engineering Moments podcasts where we discuss software engineering topics from a leadership lens. I'm your host, Ugo. Today I'm here all by myself, no guests. So it's going to be a short one, but I wanted to discuss a topic that's sort of I've had to engage with recently, and I just figured it would be a good topic to discuss on the podcast. And today we're going to be discussing migrations, how to do them well, um, because they're really a really tricky thing to do. There's different types of migration, so I want to try to narrow down the scope on what I'll be addressing today. So you know, migrations can be anything from you're migrating from one programming language to another, or let's say you've been using for mobile, you've been using Objective C, and more modern developers prefer to use Swift, or let's say you've been using Node.js and you want to start bringing more typed language into your stack, and maybe you're trying to migrate into TypeScript. A lot of these types of initiatives are usually driven sort of from down up. Now, there's other types of migrations that are usually driven from top down. Not always, but a lot of times. So, for example, um, it's a compliance thing where we need to get off this particular technology because we're going to lose our security license, or we're going to lose our certification, or something like that, or uh, management decides they no longer want to pay for this software. They found something that's more affordable, and uh, they want to completely get off it at a specific time, so they don't have to pay maybe another yearly license or something like that. So these ones that come from the top down, I usually have a more tight deadline, or should I just say like I have a hard deadline? Say tight. But anyway, these are the type of migration that I want to focus on. Now, I've, in my many years of being an engineering manager, I've done several of these migrations. Some have gone well, some have gone not so well, and these are some things that I've learned in terms of how to approach them, and that's what I want to share. Um, so the first thing I would say is before you go into any migration, you want to take your time. As with any project, planning is crucial. And one of the most crucial parts of planning a migration is doing proper inventory. So you need to know what exactly you're migrating. You need to go granular here. So, if I recall, like the last two migrations I've done, where like, you know, um, one we had to move off an old server that we were using, and we had to completely move. So that meant that all the APIs had to change on the front end. So in this particular case, you're looking at you know cataloging all of the endpoints that need to change. This is something you do both on the back end and the front end. So you might have web, you might have Android, iOS, you might even have APIs that maybe you let third party applications consume, right? So you want to go and catalog and make a note of every single thing that needs to get migrated. That is very, very important, um, because there's nothing worse than sort of at the end of your migration, you realize that you've missed a few, and that can set you back, or you maybe realize it halfway through, that can set you back quite a bit. So that's one thing you want to do. The next thing, and the other things you want to do in your planning phase in terms of just getting ready, is you want to make sure you have a good testing environment, so that when you're done with your migration, you want to make sure you have a testing environment with data, with useful testing data to validate that things will work well in production. Excuse me. And then if you have like if your application has mobile, you want to also consider ensuring that you have a force update functionality. Now, this is usually as a last resort, but you want to have it rather than not. Because sometimes when you do a migration, you have some users, after you've let people migrate to the new system, you still might have a few users who are using the old system. You want to be able to trigger this force update so those folks who are left on the old system get forced to upgrade to the new one. So that's something that you want to have. And for things like this, again, just because the way mobile releases, you want to have it a lot earlier. So this is, if you wanted to do this and you're planning the project, this is a feature you would release well in advance of the actual migration so that a lot more people have it on their phones. So that's one more thing. So, and then obviously you want to figure out your strategy around feature flags because like when you do migrations, a lot of times, especially if you're switching from one application to another, you're gonna do a lot of the work behind feature flags. So feature flags are really common these days, but it's important. It's really helpful for these sort of things. Right, and the next thing you really want to do is to then assign ownership. So, like I said, you have your inventory. You want to assign ownership. So, like I say, with maybe your backend APIs, you've documented all the APIs, but you might have 3 or 4 backend teams, or maybe even more than that, right? So you want to document like who owns which, who's going to, not even owns, whose responsibility is it to migrate specific endpoints? You want to do that across the backend. You want to do that across mobile, and not just mobile sort of globally. You want to do it, say, who's migrating Android, who's migrating iOS, who's migrating web, who's migrating all our third-party APIs. You want to see which teams are migrating, will this responsibility go to? So that's really, really important in the exercise. And then the next thing you want to start to do is you want to start having the conversations around what's going to change. You want to discuss the contracts in terms of. So I've had a lot of migrations happen where on the front end, the assumption was, oh well, we're just going to change a URL or we're just going to change the endpoint and everything's going to work. As expected. And then on the back end, they were expecting like, okay, well, all of this work, all this sort of extra, some additional work that needs to happen for us to make this migration is going to be, the front end is ready to sort of make the changes. And if you don't make sure that this conversations happen to say, okay, what do we expect to change? And how much change do we want to take on during this period, during this migration? You need to have those conversations between all the teams that are sort of involved, and hash that out, and sort of if you can, like document the sort of which things will change and which things will not change. That's really, really important because that complicates a lot of things. And in my experience, things always change on the front end. Like never assume that you will only need to change a URL. If you're lucky, you might have 1 or 2 where all you do is change the URL, but most of the time you will have code and implementation that needs to change on the front end. Now, a lot of times that's because if you're moving from one backend technology to another, there's capabilities that might have existed in one system that don't exist in the next system, and or there's legacy code that handled a specific thing, and then no one really wants to maybe no one really wants to no one really wants to go and rewrite all that stuff or whatever. So anyway, so just always assume that stuff is going to change and then hash out to clarify what needs to change, but do try to keep the changes that need to happen to a minimum if possible. And then the next thing is while you're executing, I think this is something that's really, really, really important. I think that apart from doing the inventory, this is the other really big piece that can wait, that can, eat into your time, is try as much as you can to avoid the temptation or to resist the temptation to uh, to use this opportunity as an opportunity to handle tech debt. Now, when you're doing migrations, you're going to run into a lot of old code, and the natural inclination is, oh well, let's try to clean this up. And for the most part, that's a, a good way to look at things. But if you have a hard deadline, this is definitely, because a lot of times when that starts, you'll start to see scope creep, and a 2-day migration, or like a 2-day, migrating one specific endpoint that maybe you expected to take 2 to 3 days will start to creep into 10 days, or something like that. The more because the thing about refactoring is when you start with one file, and before you know it, this file is calling this file and that file, and this particular um, data object that you've refactored is used across multiple places, and then you have to go and take care of all those other places where it's been used. So try as much as possible to resist that. What I've done in the past is, where it's absolutely necessary, then we did some refactor. But outside of that, I've advised my team to just create tech debt tickets. And what we did was we created the tickets, and then we tried to really rush and get the migration done in time, and so that we could come back and do some and handle some of those tech debt tickets. We didn't get to all of them, but we got to some of them, which was good. So that's again for me something that's really, really important. And then the next step is really releasing. So you want to try and align your release strategies. So when are we releasing to production? If there's app, when is the app going to go live? When are we flipping the feature flags? Are we going to have a feature flag on the back end and one on the front end? Or we're just going to control everything from the back end, things like that. But you want to align release strategy. I think I missed out testing, but yeah, like I said, you need to have a testing environment. So before you release, you want to make sure you've done a lot of testing with feature flag on and off, just in case, just to make sure that, yeah, the migration is done. When we release, there's things work the same as expected right now when we're still using the old system. And then when we flip the flag, no changes, everything still works fine. So you want to test with the flag on and off properly, extensively. And then post release, you want to now, let's say you're doing this to shut down an old system. Right? Let's say that's the goal of this migration. You want to set up enough tracking sort of users or usages on both platforms. So you want to see that all the traffic is going from the old system to the new system, and you want to see that flow of, okay, the usage on this system is going down, and on the other one now, on the new one, usage is going up. Now this is a lot easier with web, because as soon as you release, people go on the website and they're naturally on the latest version. But it's a lot harder with mobile apps, because again, you have to release the new app and people have to install it. So it's important to track. And then, like I say, it's a good time to get in touch with, if you've got a marketing team or something like that that send notifications out to people, or emails out. So it's a good time to sort of create some campaigns around sort of updating your app, or whatever, however you want to wrap that message up. So that's something good to do. And then you want to keep track. And if you've gotten to a point where there's a couple people who are still on the old system who are like haven't migrated, that's a good time to turn on that force update feature where people go on the app and they're forced to install the latest version before they can continue using. And you'll be really surprised. I think I've done this now at least 3 times, and there's always people on like really old versions of the app, or for some reason just don't update the app for a long time. So that's why I said when you want to get that feature into your app as soon as possible. It's not something you want to go to all the time, but you want to know that you have it for when you need it. Anyway, that's those are sort of the things that I've done to help with migrations. I hope that this helped someone, or yeah, I hope you learned something new. And thank you very much for listening today, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.